We want to bring in the executive director of the American Center for Law and Justice and a member of President Trump's legal team, Jordan Sekulow, no stranger to Wake Up America or Newsmax. Good morning. We also want to welcome Senior Advisor for Strategy for President Trump, Steve Cortez. Steve, welcome back to the show. Jordan, I want to start with you. By the way, we had Mark Halperin on a little bit. He apparently looked into South Bend, Indiana, where Buttigieg is the mayor. Apparently the city has 20 city buses, so well qualified to be transportation secretary. But let me get to my question. The U.S. Supreme Court ordered a federal court to re-examine Colorado's coronavirus restrictions on indoor religious services. What can you tell us about this?
This is a shift that has only happened because of who President Trump nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court. These cases were all losers. I mean, and I mean that in a nice way, because Chief Justice Roberts kept siding with the liberals in the court every time churches brought challenges. And then there was a shift in the court, and there was the movement to fill the seat with Justice Amy Coney Barrett. And when that happened, when there was a challenge to New York's restrictions back in November, late November, she joined the four other conservative justices. Chief Justice Roberts joined the liberals in a 5-4 decision out of New York, and said, no, you cannot trample on a constitutional right with these state restrictions when there's something that is higher protected. So this is actually very important, because the free exercise clause of religion in the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, Rob, has basically been eviscerated by the Supreme Court, and now we're starting to see more life into it. So now it's New York, California, Colorado, New Jersey, right, and the Ninth Circuit in Nevada. So we actually saw a circuit court in Nevada say, you can't, this was just yesterday, you cannot treat churches different, or other places of worship different than a casino or other business. Those aren't protected by the First Amendment, but religious free exercise is. And so this is a tribute really to President Trump and the way he has filled not just Supreme Court seats, but also changing circuit courts like the Ninth Circuit, which is not nearly as liberal as it used to be.
Virus or not, you cannot ask people, you cannot tell people, demand that they don't worship. That's one of our most precious and sacred rights here.
And what's key is that if anybody is out there in a state that has this restriction, what the Supreme Court has said, Rob, is basically bring us the case. And ACLJ, we can do that for you for free. Your church has to do it. The Archdiocese in D.C. is doing it right now. It's aclj.org/help, but your church has to bring it. And the Supreme Court is issuing these very quick opinions saying, nope, these restrictions fail.
Yeah. All right. I want to bring in Steve. Yesterday, Kayleigh McEnany was asked if President Trump would welcome Joe Biden into the White House, as is tradition, before the January 20th inauguration, about, I think it's 35 days from today. Here's her response.
The president is still involved in ongoing litigation related to the election. Yesterday's vote was one step in the constitutional process, so I will leave that to him and refer you to the campaign for more on that litigation.
So, Steve, the conversation, Joe Biden is the president-elect officially now. Does the narrative have to start shifting toward a transition?
Rob, I don't think so, and I don't think that the president is going to dignify this steal, because that's what's going on right now. There's a grand larceny afoot in our country, an electoral larceny, and for the president to act as though that's okay, for him to invite Joe Biden in and smile for cameras, or for him to attend the inauguration, in my view, and of course that's his decision to make, but in my view, that would dignify this crime against the electorate of the United States. So litigation is ongoing. We are not done fighting. Clearly, look, I recognize reality. I know that the Electoral College did, in fact, vote. I also know that's not final. The Constitution mentions one date and one date only, and that is January 20th at high noon. So there is still ongoing litigation that may well prove, look, we think that there's enormous evidence already of not just irregularities, but actual fraud, as well as massive constitutional problems. But what we may well see in the coming days and weeks is a more obvious smoking gun, particularly as it relates to Dominion voting systems. The forensic analysis out of Antrim County in Michigan was highly alarming. If that is replicated in other places in this country, we submit to the American people that this decision is not yet over. It is not yet finalized, and we will continue to fight.
Yes. Jordan, does President Trump have legal options that are available to him right now as we get closer to high noon on the 20th of January?
Yeah, I think as Steve mentioned, so you've got these cases pending that were under seal for the most part, so we weren't getting a lot of the info about what was happening with the software that was being reviewed. Some of that was because of privacy concerns. Those seals are starting to be lifted. So we saw what happened with Atrium. That, again, I think has to be replicated. I think, Steve, we're all realistic people, and everyone knows that to put together a legal challenge that is significant enough to change the outcome of the election would mean taking that and figuring that out in other states. I know Sidney Powell and other attorneys are still working on doing just that. As the key dates really were not the Electoral College votes, as Steve said. It was January 6th. That is when Congress would certify the election, and of course, really the key date, January 20th. And I cite the late Justice Ginsburg on January 6th. I mean, she said, really, that's really the first time Congress takes action. All these other dates are kind of meaningless when it comes to bringing a legal action. But as we know, and I want to be fair to the Newsmax audience and set the stage, it's been an uphill challenge in court, even though we believe it's absurd that these cases have been thrown out on like standing and you should have brought this before, and we did, and they told us it was too early, and then they say we're bringing it too late. And they don't even want to look at the evidence. And that has been the biggest problem, is that getting the evidence into the court record so that the judges can't just throw these out on meaningless standing grounds.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see how this evolves. I think many are waiting for this smoking gun, this alleged smoking gun before January 20th. Steve, I want to pivot. The Chinese spy story, Fang Fang and Eric Swalwell. First of all, I think if Eric Swalwell were a Republican member of the House of Representatives, he'd be off the Intel Committee like 5 minutes after this broke. Why is he still on the Intel Committee? What is going on with Nancy Pelosi, and why hasn't she moved on this yet, just to get the headlines off the front page?
Well, listen, he would be off the Intel Committee, and he should be. And I would certainly say that if he were a Republican. And by the way, I will also say this to show that I'm bipartisan in my criticism here. The Republican Party, pre-Donald Trump, I think, unfortunately, too often did the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party in Washington, D.C. But the Republican Party has been transformed into a party of nationalism and economic protection, and now recognizes the threat that the CCP is. By the way, to tie this into the presidential election, I'm also a believer that the president needs to, unfortunately, but I think he needs to name a special counsel now to investigate the China-Biden bribery scandal. I think that it is so damning, the information there. And corporate media, certainly not Newsmax, but most of corporate media, has suddenly decided that this is a story worth covering now that the election is over. The information that was revealed by both the laptop from hell as well as substantial, credible eyewitnesses like Tony Bobolinsky is so damning of the entire Biden family, including the, quote, big guy, Joe Biden, that if he potentially does become president, if he is sworn in on January 20th, we have a massive national security risk in this country of a commander-in-chief for the first time in our history who's compromised by the sworn and most dangerous enemy of the United States, the Chinese Communist Party. And I think it requires a special counsel named in the coming days that will have the full power to investigate this entire scenario.
All right, gentlemen, we got to leave it there. Thank you very much. Steve Cortes, Jordan Sekulow, thank you. We appreciate your time.